Moreno Verabeno.
Hi, Amos, and how are you?
I am doing well. I'm excited for our 4th episode.
I know it's been really interesting so far. Looking forward to this one. It's a really important one because it definitely has to do with the one that we talked about last time about confidence and arrogance,
sure.
And also if you think that you may have a tendency towards arrogance, well, it simply means that you think you're the world's most important person ever.
Yeah.
And in this case, they're going to introduce a subject that there's definitely people that we all need in our lives to help us.
Yeah.
Because we're definitely not the most important people ever. And kind of instilling humility in us, but also from a practical perspective. Today we're going to talk about mentorship. So go ahead and introduce the subject.
You just said what the subject is. So today's subject is the importance of a mentor. And we're going to talk about a bit of what mentors have taught us, and as well as why someone might need a mentor from our perspective. I think mentorship is a very important thing to have for anyone. I remember when I attended a conference in Australia about 5 years ago now, and there was a lady that talked about life as a river, and she talked about in the context of cancer being a journey, and and the river being having fish in it, and the fish are going along with you on this journey down the river, and as life goes on, some fish join you on the trip and some fish don't, and some fish will join you for some time and some fish will leave. And so I think those can be viewed as mentors, for sure, but not necessarily. Could be friends. Could be, although I would consider my friends mentors. I don't know about yourself.
I do want to make a distinction in this podcast between mentorship and friendship. I will refer to the Mishnaic source about that.
Yeah.
Because they are two very different things. They could be connected, but I do want to try to keep it separate because they're two different types of relationships you have with people. A mentor is someone who gives you guidance as the main objective of the relationship. Someone who gives you guidance. A friend could be a lot of other things. It could be a confidant. It could be someone who has your back on different things. It's very different type of relationship.
But I think that the two intersect.
A little bit.
For sure.
We're going to disagree on this. Which is really good, by the way. Because last week we didn't disagree.
Or the week before.
No, that's really bad.
Yeah.
We have to disagree on something. Okay, so let's start with the with the Mishnah. The Mishnah, which the Mishnaic source is written for those who want kind of a historical reference to it. It was written from the Greek rule in Israel, pre-Hanukkah, all the way until the end of the Hadrianic rule, even post the Hadrianic rule of the Roman period, right before the Byzantine period. So the 7 generations of the Mishnah, that's when it was written. And then the Talmud was a commentary on the Mishnah for those who understand what I'm talking about. If you don't know what the Talmud is, just look it up. You'll see what it is. It is the written oral law, the interpretation of the oral law of the Torah, of the Jewish faith. So there's one of the very most important parts of the Mishnah is a Masechet, or a section, a volume called Pirkei Avot. The Ethics of Our Fathers talks about values, talks about principles. And the person teaching this is a person named Rabbi Yeshua ben Prachia. He had a student, and his student was none other than Jesus, was his student.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting in its own regard. And I just want to mention that, and I don't want to get into the history of him and how Christianity started. That's a different subject. But I want you to picture that the person saying this phrase is the person who views himself as a failed mentor. In that context. He views himself as a failed mentor, and therefore he's going to teach 3 teachings. which is very common in Pirkei Avot. You have 3 teachings. So he says as follows. Yeshua, this is the Pirkei Avot, Perek Aleph, chapter 1, Mishnah 6. And it says, Yeshua ben Prachia Omer, Yeshua ben Prachia says, Aseh lecha rav, make for yourself a rav. I'm going to not define that. Mentorship is part of that, but we're going to define that in a moment. Aseh lecha rav, which is make yourself essentially a mentor or a rabbi. Ukneh lecha chaver, acquire for yourself a friend. So he distinguishes between rav and a chaver.
Okay.
That's where I'm getting this from. And hevei dan et kol adam lechav zchut, and you should judge every single person favorably. So that's a very important subject in its own regard.
That seems to sort of outlie from the other two.
Mm-hmm. It seems, yeah. But it's also because he may have not judged his student favorably. Again, but that's a different subject. It doesn't have to do with mentorship necessarily. But those are 3 things he wanted to teach that are important to teach out of from his life's work. Like if you asked him at the last day before he died, if you knew when that was, like what are the most 3 important things, he would say those 3 things, and then and he would leave the world with that legacy, which he did. So, make for yourself a rav is very interesting because the verb there is aseh lecha, make for yourself, meaning you have to go out and find it.
Yeah,
it's not just gonna. Mentor's not just gonna come to you.
Yeah.
So you either have to get yourself into a system where there are mentors, but it's also about making the relationship with the mentor as a mentor and keeping that relationship up, and it's really more on the student than it is on the mentor, which is very interesting.
So in that context, we talked about this briefly yesterday in your shiur, when we talked about having a lot of students, which is also in Pirkei Avot, in the first Mishnah in it, says that you should have lots of students, and in that sort of context, you mentioned briefly that nowadays we have it almost easy because we have knowledge at our fingertips, meaning you don't need to necessarily go to the library and know exactly what you need to find and actively look for something.
Yeah, information is at our fingertips. The question,
but in that context,
yeah,
searching for a mentor or seeking wisdom is like very nuanced in the sense that you should be actively looking for it rather than waiting for one to stumble across one.
That's right, absolutely. And when you find a mentor, you have to really latch on to that mentor and really make that person your mentor. You don't necessarily have to proclaim him as such, or her, by the way, right? Rather, it's about that developing that relationship and turning to, and we'll talk about what that means as far as advice, as far as following them by example. But aseh lecha rav. So if we just go back to the original meaning of the Mishnah, I'm just finding it here. Here it is. So I wrote an article about this. I just found the article. Edition 430 of Kol Barama, when I used to write for, this is in 2004 when I wrote my articles on Pirkei Avot. So I have a whole article here, Steve, and you can see it. You can't see it on the podcast, but you can see if they put a picture of a Rav in the background, Aseh lecha Rav. There are 400 words on Aseh lecha Rav. So you can really explain it in 3 facets. One is actually to have for yourself a Rav that you ask questions to. When you don't know.
Yeah.
It could be in the realm of halacha. What do you do? This is community rabbis. Even community rabbis have their own rabbis. Like when I feel a little bit out of my depth or I feel that I need advice about halachic subjects, rulings that I need to make. I'll give you a good example of one, which I won't get into the specifics, but it's because it's a weighted issue, and you don't want to make the wrong decision because that can have consequences down the line. So there's a fast food chain here, which I won't mention the chain, but fast food chain that is vegan and has kosher certificate. The question is, do I put the kosher kiwi certificate on it or not? Because community members want to eat there. Yeah. And what do you tell them officially? What do you tell them unofficially? And the question was, if they switch their patties to patties that are actually kosher from a more recognized kosher certification, mainly the OU, then could we turn it over and proclaim it as kosher in the name of kosher kiwi?
Yeah. I
won't get into the specifics because that's a whole other subject. But what I did was I asked one of the people you can say this is a chaver, maybe this is where the borderline is, but this is one of the interpretations of what a rav is. It helps me make the decisions and the back and forth decisions because it's a very consequential one. And he told me under what parameters I'd be able to potentially offer them certification. Up until this point, it hasn't been met, so therefore I haven't gone ahead with that. But we had a whole conversation with that, and I really asked his advice, like, what are the issues? What are the halachic issues? What's the political landscape? He actually knows the person who gave the certificate.
So in this context, did you approach the person as a mentor or as a friend?
As a mentor.
Okay.
I mean, I'm looking for his advice.
Yeah.
I'm not looking to vent to him or just to him to give me his random opinion. Like, I'm actually looking for him to direct me here. What are the issues? What issues did I miss? How do you think this will be viewed in the general rabbinical sphere or ecosphere, if you will, of Australia and New Zealand?
The circles.
What will be the political ramifications of this? He also knows the person. Can you really trust this person? Can you ever trust this person? Things like that. And it became, anyways, without getting into the details of it, he told me there are certain parameters under which I could. None of them have been met up until now. So therefore, I haven't made it kosher kiwi. Plus, I'd also have to be in line with Rav Friedler to do that. Anything like that in the name of kosher kiwi. To make a restaurant, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
So I didn't take it lightly. But for that, and for other issues, that's just one example. So that's what a Rav means, even for rabbis, I mean. But, in general, like people, yourself, other people in this community and in many other communities go and ask questions if they don't know from the rabbi, from the rabbis, and what do I do in this case?
Yeah.
From simple things, is this food kosher, to what do I do regarding a failed relationship, to what do I do regarding this halachic issue that came up, a lot of questions around the use of the mikveh, things like that. So you have, and many around tefillah, do you say this tefillah? What's the ruling in this case?
Yeah.
Things like that. And those are things that you really need to ask somebody on a regular basis. That's one. Second one is, which I thought is very interesting. Aseh oto lecha lerav, kedei shetisa v'titen imo, v'yitkayem talmudcha biyadecha. Essentially making for yourself a chavruta. Make your chavruta like a rav.
Explain a chavruta for those.
So chavruta is like a study buddy. Chavruta is like you study in pairs.
Yeah.
And you study with somebody else. Ideally, when you study, nobody should study alone.
Yeah.
You should always study in a group, or at least in a pair.
So, within the podcast context, would be pretty boring if I sat and made a podcast by myself.
Yeah, or me.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, that the whole concept of a podcast. There's a back and forth. There's a difference of opinions.
Yeah,
and there's a dynamic.
And this is why we need to argue as well.
Absolutely, you have to argue. If we don't argue like 3 weeks in a row, then we have to start. Wrong. Yeah, we have to
take it all down, start all over.
Edit our notes or something. Yeah. So, what is a chavruta? I mean, the classic chavruta was Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish couldn't be two polar opposites. Reish Lakish was the head of the bandits, head of the thieves, who eventually converted to Judaism, married Rabbi Yochanan's sister, because he offered his sister. Rabbi Yochanan was the most beautiful man in the world at that time, or at least so proclaimed by Reish Lakish, which is very interesting. And Rabbi Yochanan was the editor of the Jerusalem Talmud, lived in the second generation of the Amoraim, Talmudic era in Israel. And he was a righteous person. Reish Lakish came from a very, very immoral background, head of the bandits. Eventually became a great tzaddik in his own regard, and they became a chevruta. How is that measured? Reish Lakish would ask them 24 questions, and Rabbi Yochanan, would offer him 24 answers. When Reish Lakish died, they offered a new chavruta to Rabbi Yochanan, and all the chavruta did was be his yes man. They would just agree with him. Rabbi Yochanan says, "O chavruta o mituta." I'd rather have a chavruta, or I'd rather be dead. If I don't have a chavruta, I'd rather be dead. That's his actual quote. It's a huge statement. And basically what he's saying is he needs the contract. He doesn't want somebody just to be a yes man. We're not a culture, in Judaism at least, of being yes men or women, right? It's not about agreeing. It's about the conversation. It's about the dynamic. It's about the arguing. Of course, it has to be within a respectful context.
Yeah.
That's when it gets off the rails. It's being a respectful context. But nonetheless, the sharpening of the minds is very important, and presenting the other point of view, or a critical point of view, or questioning a person is a really, really good thing, and important to advance your understanding of anything. And that is also under a commentary of Aselecha Rav. The third thing, this is my personal opinion at the time, this is about 16 years ago, I said, Aselecha Rav means make for yourself a Rav. Make yourself into a Rav. Not necessarily as a profession, but make yourself into a mentor. I'll give you a practical example of this. You have the 12-step process for addictions.
Yeah.
So what's the 12th step? Become a mentor to somebody else.
Yeah, okay.
And if you don't do the 12th step, then all the other 11 steps will eventually kind of evaporate and not have any effect.
Yeah.
So you need to elevate yourself into a point where you are a mentor. I mean, you can speak about how it works in karate. I don't know. Does it work the same way?
Essentially. I mean, it's certain people, it's the way you teach.
What do you mean?
Yeah, so it's all based on experience. So you spend however long you do to grade up the ranks, and then eventually you get to the point where you can start teaching, or you can help out in a class. That's different to actually teaching. Then when you actually teach, then you have to take the responsibility of the full class, as well as if things go wrong, the responsibility falls on you in that sense. The mentorship side, again, like you said, now that I think about it, is it's interesting because I won't go out of my way to help someone in terms of I don't know how to train outside of class.
Yeah, but I'm saying even within the context of the class, the student eventually becomes a mentor to other students, to new students.
Yeah, correct.
On that level.
Yeah.
Right, within the context of the class.
Yeah. Okay, we have a guest.
We have a guest. She's probably the most beautiful Rebbitzin in all of Wellington. And I say that.
I don't know of any other one.
Say that without the word probably, or else I get in trouble. She is my beautiful wife, the Rebbitzin, Rachel Shifra Talon. She is here as a guest speaker, who's, by the way, been very, very patient about not interrupting or saying anything up until this point, even though she's possibly crawling out of her skin. So, but she has a lot to say, and is definitely a mentor to a lot of people here in Wellington. So, please.
With that introduction, I can just leave now. That's it. I don't even need to be here. My goodness. You two are adorable, by the way. I'm just enjoying this very much. These microphones look like aliens. I just wanted to say that Rabbi Niven had a very interesting thing about making yourself a mentor. So he said there's something called the tripod of objectivity, which means that if you have a stool and it has two rungs, like 2 feet, it's going to tip over. But if you have 3 feet, it's in one of the most stable structures. So he says that a tripod of objectivity is that you have for yourself a person ahead of you in the life cycle, which is your mentor. You have for yourself a friend, and you have for yourself someone behind you in the life cycle. And each 3 keep you in balance. And it's very interesting because if you're, for example, I'm a mother, that would be a person behind me in the life cycle. So one of my jobs as a mother is that I have to be and represent and model the behavior that I want to impart into my children. So that is somebody behind the life cycle. As for a friend, a really good friend, as they say, my husband always likes to tell his story about a friend, which I'm sure he'll tell next. But a really good friend, what they do is they'll really keep it honest with you. They'll really tell you if you're blowing it, if you're stupid, if this is a wrong decision, if this is a good decision, and they'll really support you. And they'll love you no matter what, wherever you're going, but they'll be truthful to you. And a mentor, a person ahead of you in the life cycle, is somebody that you aspire to and look forward to and go towards. And I kind of view it the same way as if you put in information into, like, for example, a GPS, right? So if you have it, it's an amazing map, it's incredible. But if you don't know where you're going with it, and you don't put in a destination, it's a useless tool. And if you put in a destination, you actually get somewhere. And it's the same with this in this world, that if we have somebody that's going to a destination that we want to go to and we look at that, then we're going that direction. Our eyes are turned that direction and we move towards that person. I also found it very interesting when I used to hang out with people that I was inspired by, that I would feel like a fraud. And I'd be like, what am I doing here next to all these amazing, incredible people? And then I realized that many, many, many years, as I started spending time with them, I started to adapt into them and become like them. And I was inspired by them. And then one day I was like, oh, I'm one of those cool people with a funky headscarf. I always wanted to be a cool person with a funky headscarf, and boom, somehow it's happened because I kept going that direction. So that's just what I wanted to add. Go back to your conversation.
No, but I really like the analogy of a 3-legged stool in that sense. It's really good because it gives you a perspective in the sense of you need someone who is not necessarily both of one thing or one of everything. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, after all, we can learn from everyone and everything. We're told to.
It's very true. And also, if you take, for example, if you're just a mentor, you can get really full of yourself. Right? Yeah. Because you're like, oh, I'm amazing. Sure. Everybody's asking me everything. And then you need someone ahead of you who's way more amazing than you. So that you re-humble yourself, and then you need a friend who's not going to call you on it. Right?
It's very good for, I think it's a practice that people should go through simply just to ground themselves.
Yeah, it's very, very grounding. And also, when you have a mentor that you're mentoring, I find out how many gaps I have in my education and my intelligence and wisdom. And somebody will ask me a question, I'm like, I have no clue. I have to go find out that information.
All right, so let's argue. Let's argue. Let's get to more fun things here. So, what do you think is there a difference? I'll put it as an open-ended question. Is there a difference between a friend and a mentor in your mind? Which is yes or no, so it's a closed-ended question. But is there a difference? And why? And how do you really see the dynamic between a friend and a mentor? Let's argue about that.
So I think there is a difference, but it's a nuanced difference. Because I view my friends as people who can mentor me. Not always, but they certainly have different experiences to what I do, which I can then learn from. In that sense, I'd view some of my friends, I can't say all of my friends are mentors, some of them are, some of them are not, but some of my friends I definitely do view as a mentor. And then to go back to Rachel's point of having something to aspire to, some of your friends you'll find very inspiring, and you'd be like, oh, I want to be somewhere like that. And so that's, for you to yourself, to set yourself a goal, you might aspire to be like your mentor, which could be a friend in that sense. So I think there is a certain crossover between a mentor and a friend. in that sense.
So just to clarify, you're saying that your friends could become your mentors at any given moment for very specific things. They
Yes.
still remain your friends.
Yes, correct.
As friends. And it doesn't jeopardize the friendship.
Yep.
So I have a different point of view. My view of mentorship is much more of a traditional point of view, which is I really side with out of the three opinions that I brought before. The first one being your Rav that you go to for questions, advice, etc. The second one being a charuta, back and forth, which is interesting. The third one, making yourself a Rav. I mainly view like the first and the third one have the most weight and is a true mentor. Meaning, it is true that you can take advice from your friends. I do agree on that. I just don't agree that makes your friend a mentor. I think your friend remains a friend. And this is where I think we disagree. Because the mentor is someone who is, by design, not your friend. You will treat them differently. You'll treat them with a different level of respect. And you will go to them for mentorship or for guidance, for either questions or to give to get a perspective on things, or to help you increase your emunah. And if you have a friendship with them, it can actually compromise the mentorship. If your rabbi is your best friend, that on some level it could, for some people it can work. For many people it won't. Or if you're what's a mentor in karate? Dojo? Sensei. If your sensei is your best friend, it's not going to work because they're not going to be your sensei. They won't be able to, put you in your place sometimes, or give you perspective or correct you, because it'll be a different dynamic.
Okay. So I understand what you're saying. I still disagree.
Good.
Because
no, you have to disagree.
What if you guys define what is a friend?
That's a different podcast.
Well, if you define what is a friend and what is a mentor, then
it gives a distinction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's a good point.
That is a good point.
More fuel for argument.
Okay, so what's a friend?
Ooh.
Going back to the stool analogy, to the seed analogy, a friend is someone that can call you out on your shortcomings, in that sense, but also help you develop and grow, because it's, after all relationships across the board should be mutual to some respect. I think should be mutual in the sense of you're both deriving a benefit from each other in order to both grow together.
Yeah, but does that define a friendship? Or that's just a secondary benefit out of a friendship?
Course, because it's like toxic relationships are ones that are one-sided. Tend to be.
So friendship, you're saying it's a mutual... So are you saying the purpose of friendship is to develop each other?
No, but
that's what you said.
It's something that happens naturally through a friendship.
Oh, but that's not the definition. So again, what's your definition of friendship?
I don't like this.
Embrace it, Amma. Embrace it. Okay, I'll give you my definition of friendship. And you can think of your definition of friendship. I do agree with you. That's definitely part of friendship. But I don't know if that's your definition of friendship, even according to you.
I don't think I've ever been asked to define friendship as such.
Well, there you go. Thank God for podcasts. Now you have. Does that make me a good friend?
Maybe I just need to cut some people out of my life, because be cutthroat.
So I heard that a friend is someone who's going to be with you no matter what happens. Going to be with you every step of the way. Has nothing to do with developing the person. Has nothing to do with calling a person out. I think that's the job of a mentor. A friend could do that, but I don't think that's the purpose of friendship or the definition of friendship. Friendship is, it says, acquire for yourself a friend. So a friend is literally a chaver. Chaver means chibur, from connecting. It's a connector. They're going to be connected to you no matter what. It's like an ideal, like, husband and wife, right? No matter what happens, good or bad, whatever, they just stay with each other, like, because they're just going to make it work. Right? That's friendship.
Okay.
Now, as part of that, there's dynamic to it. You mentioned one of the important dynamics where a friend will feel comfortable to call the other person out and also to develop a person, if necessary, because of that connection. But the connection itself is completely independent of that. And so I heard from a psychologist, this is not my analogy, but what a friend is. And I think I've said this in one or two of my drashot. I mentioned this a lot because I really like the definition, which is, if you call your friend, let's call him Zach. So you call up Zach at 2 a.m. You say, hey, Zach, I need you to come over. I can't explain why. And then Zach says, okay, I'm coming over. Hangs up the phone. That's a good friend. But what's a really good friend? A really good friend is that Zach calls you up at 2 a.m. And Zach's like, listen, I need you to come over right now because I can't explain why. And you say, listen, I just can't. And then Zach says, okay, I understand. That's a really good friend.
I disagree with your definition of a friend.
It's not my definition. It's a psychologist.
I disagree.
You're my wife. You're not allowed to disagree with me. I'm completely joking. Wives are completely allowed to disagree with me. Okay, go ahead and disagree with me. 3-way disagreement. This is awesome. This is getting interesting. Here we go.
Okay, first of all, you said wives in plural. What do you think you're getting? I'm sorry. Time out for the rabbi. Okay, so
Wife, I said.
Yeah, you said wives. Nice try.
Okay.
A friend is someone who understands you, and if they don't, they try to. I also think that a friend is a form of a selfish thing, not in a negative way. Being selfish is not necessarily negative. A friend is somebody that you recognize, right? You recognize qualities in them. You like doing things with them, and when you're with them, you feel good. So it is, in a way, a selfish experience. Would you agree with me?
Yes. But I think in that sense, most things are, right? I mean, like, doing this podcast, for me, in a sense, is a selfish experience because it's to sort of supplement and develop my learning about everyday topics. But me putting it out there is, you know, look what I did. I did. So in that sense, most things could be viewed as selfish as well, I think. But that's where, going back to my not definition, as you said, of the mutual benefit, it's selfish for me, but it's also selfish for the other person.
Yeah.
In that sense.
Yeah.
So where does that keep us now?
Well, let's... By the way, we have the Rebbitzin here as our tripod of objectivity. So that's your new nickname. Tripod of objectivity. Thank God that wasn't my pickup line, by the way, you know. Hey, baby, can you be my tripod of objectivity? I don't think would have worked over 15 years ago. Anyways.
We're getting all the sound bites for this podcast.
It's our podcast. We're not accountable to anybody except our subscribers. So, going back to mentorship. Subscribe. By the way, you need to subscribe. It doesn't cost you money, and it's a lot of fun. And you help out Amos. Come on. Amos, he's a great guy. Help him out. It's a great podcast.
Our goal is 100 at the moment. Our goal is 100.
Our initial goal is 100. Our goal is to get, Harvey Norman to sponsor this podcast. So we're building up. We're building up to that. Yeah, that sponsored by
$10 for cables.
We're gonna Harvey Norman, Pack and Save, More Wilsons, and New World. That's the order which we're gonna get our sponsorship, right?
I'm not complaining.
Yeah, I'm not.
I'll take any sponsor.
Very good. So, to get back to, like, when do you need when do you need a mentor versus when do you need a friend? And maybe we'll talk about different scenarios, and instead of getting out of definitions, because definitions are just that. They really define something, but it's very cut and dry. But there's a lot of gray area. Then you talk about a scenario. Look, who would you turn to? Let's say you have a mentor. Usually, though not always, they're usually older than you, and they usually have different life experience, and you usually turn to them. You wouldn't go out for beer with them, but you turn to them for advice and have a meeting with them or a formal phone call. This, at least in my mind. Versus a friend.
Now we have this actually noted in the technical world that the rabbi isn't going out for anyone for beer anymore. You hear that? Water for you forever. We have just ascertained that. Sorry, no.
I don't have beer anyways because I'm a celiac. But thank you for clarifying that.
No alcohol for the mentor rabbi.
For YouTube. I appreciate it. And LinkedIn. Anybody else is listening. Yeah, if you want to come out with beer with me, don't. Just buy me a whiskey. So...
I would feel like this is my last podcast visit.
Yeah, you're always invited back as a tripod of objectivity.
Are you saying you're objectifying me?
I'm just saying you're more objective than either of us.
You need a mentor, Rabbi.
I do have mentors. Well, so let's say you're in a situation where you want to change careers, right? So let's talk about different scenarios, okay? You don't necessarily have to talk about yourself, but you can talk about, like, Zach, our guy Zach here, that we invented just a few moments ago. So Zach wants to change careers. Let's say he's like 30, and he's been a computer technician, and he's really bored with his job.
Yeah.
And whatever, he's having a kind of early/midlife crisis or whatever it is. Completely legitimate, happens a lot today. So the question is, who does he turn to? Does he go to, Billy, his friend, or does he go to his, like, somebody like, thinking of somebody like Ernie Rosenthal, who's a career professional, right? Or I know you've had engagements with him, or with somebody else that an adult that he would defer to. Either in a professional capacity or someone more of an authority figure or a teacher of his or as a parent, right? Whoever the mentor, uncle, grandfather, whoever the mentor may be, male or female, it doesn't matter. So who would that fall into? Someone you'd go to a mentor for, or someone you go to, go out for a beer or coffee and like just hash it out with somebody as a friend? It's a real gray area.
Yeah. I think in practice, Zach would probably do both. He'd go to someone as a friend as well. Okay. As well as someone as a mentor.
So what would be... So let's play it out. Let's say he goes to both. I agree. Most people would go to both. So in a moment I'll ask if you had to choose one, who you have to choose. But before that, talk about what would be the dynamics, not the specifics, of course, but what would be the dynamic of the conversation between Zach and the mentor and Zach and the friend. Because there would be a different dynamic of conversation.
Yeah. Well, right. Zach and the mentor would definitely be a more formal conversation. In the sense of, how are you doing? Zach will dress up in a bit of a suit, present himself as though he's meeting an employer. Potential employer, let's say. Shake his hand.
Doesn't have to be an employer.
No, but like, he's looking for a career change.
Yes, he is.
In this scenario, he is going to present himself to the best of his ability to the mentor in order to get across, with his appearance certainly, that he is serious about whatever he's going to the mentor for advice for. Say he's going to a career professional.
Right.
You dress up as though you're going for an interview.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you want to say, I'm employable. It's not like I've been a bad employee.
Yeah.
Rather, I'm employable, I'm good. I'm making this choice to a career change, and I want to know which direction to go.
Exactly.
I think also if you're going to make a decision that's going to change and impact your life, you're going to want to speak with an expert. You're not going to want to go... I mean, a friend is a great thing to support you in the change experience as you go through it, how it feels, how you're feeling, how it's experiencing. But if you're going to a mentor, you're going to an expert in their field, and you're saying, I want to make a life choice. Your life choices look good to me. I'd like to go where you're going. give me a hand in this direction, help me,
Yeah.
uncover which way I'm going with this. And I trust you. Also, it has to do with the level of trust. Like, I have some friends, no offense friends, that make really bad choices. I wouldn't want to make their choices.
I know.
Oh, shush. But there's also, I also make really bad choices. However, if I'm going to make a decision that's going to impact the future of my life, I definitely want to pick an expert in the field.
Yes, that's a really good dynamic. One is talking about feelings and going through like my subjective reality, which you do with your friend, and the other is much more objective, like helping make a decision, which is your mentor. But the question is almost, is that how you view it? That's how my wife views it.
That's how I would like to view it.
Mm-hmm. However,
I don't think I always view it like that.
So how do you view it?
I think personally I'd probably go to a friend first, because going back to last week, I probably don't feel confident to go to a career professional first up and say, because in the sense of being a human, it's very hard to admit that you need help. In that sense.
Yes, it is.
So, in that sense, going to a mentor might be more difficult in this
You're
scenario.
saying it's more intimidating.
It's more intimidating, for sure, than going to a friend. Although the friend can, for sure, like, push you to be like, hey, you're going and doing this. Because that's where we pull the distinction of a friend can call you out on your shortcomings and drive you to do what's best for you.
Well, do you think a friend would know you better than a mentor?
Depends.
Or not necessarily.
It depends on
Depends
who the
on the
mentor, depends who's the friend.
Right. But as a general rule, well, they know you differently. Meaning your friend would be able to probably feel more comfortable telling you what they thought exactly. Usually a mentor, what they do, just from my personal experience, is they'll give you like recommendations, right?
They'll give you like the options.
They'll give you your options.
You can do this,
this, is that. Yeah, and this is probably what's going to happen.
Like going to the doctor. Really.
Yeah. But the doctor will never tell you what to do. Sometimes the doctor will take over, say, we have to do surgery, or we have to do this. You don't have a choice. Outside of that, the doctor will say, well, you can do this. I recommend. I'll give you a prescription. Whether you do it or not, it's completely up to you. But wait a minute. But I just cut off my tripod.
Welcome to Everything Under the Sun, where everything is a domestic.
Under the sun. Everything is domestic. I almost be part of the family now. What can I say? So a friend though could tell you straight, like, listen, you're being a real idiot about this. Do that. Like, if I were you, I'd do that. But the mentor wouldn't say stuff like that. A good mentor, at least, wouldn't say stuff like that. Unless the mentor will say, it's so clear you should do this, or you're on the right direction. But it'll be much more objective, much more kind of vague.
Yeah.
Just by the nature of things.
A sign, I think, of a good mentor is that the mentor doesn't make you like them. They help you uncover the best that is you and your strengths and what's going to be good for you and your experiences.
Right. A mentor is objective and a friend is subjective, which I think is the best definition to define the difference between a mentor and a friend. Now, sometimes you need a friend to develop you. Sometimes you feel more comfortable with a friend.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need the mentor because the friend is not going to have that objectivity because they like you too much. And they may not give you the right advice that you need at the moment.
Does that not go back to your definition of a good friend versus a really good friend?
Mm-hmm.
Because a really good friend will know when to be objective and subjective.
Right.
A good friend will not necessarily know that.
Will just be with you no matter what.
Exactly.
Sometimes the best thing is to tell somebody nothing. Or to give them bad advice. Like, I know, like, for example, I was listening to a TED Talk. This is our podcast. You are a guest. My dearest wife. You can start your own podcast. So, he's talking about he wanted to be on the Joe Rogan show.
Yeah.
This guy, who, anyways, he had interesting. He ended up going on the Joe Rogan show, but he said the best thing that Joe Rogan ever did. Joe Rogan, of course, famous podcast, probably the most famous podcast today. One of the most famous.
Yeah.
Moved to Austin, Texas now. Joe Rogan Experience is great stuff. So he said the best thing that Joe Rogan did was he wrote Joe Rogan an email, and what did Joe Rogan do? He just didn't respond.
Mm.
And that was the best thing that ever happened to him. Because then he had to figure it out himself. And then he told his whole story, and eventually Joe Rogan, like 6 or 8 months later, did invite him to the podcast. But that's interesting. Like, you really need somebody sometimes to not give you, like, what you want or what you think you want. And so sometimes your friend could say, you know, I know you're going down this path, but whatever happens, don't worry, I'll help you. And they won't necessarily give you that objectivity or that advice, but they'll just be with you. And that's also part of friendship. You know, so the question is, like, do you want to be more of a friend or more of a mentor to other people, and also how who you turn to for what? Career advice, just as one example. I'm going to give the final word on this, from my perspective, to our wonderful, illustrious, beautiful guest, the Revitz and Rachel Tull, to talk about friendship and mentorship and how she sees herself as a friend and as a mentor.
That's called putting someone on the spot. I wasn't even paying attention anymore. Sorry, you guys. What do you want me to do? Say about being a friend and a mentor?
Yes. How is it?
You know, here's the part where we pause because what? Slowing down.
No, we're not going to pause. Listen, how is it? How is it for you?
We're on the fly. We're live.
Or you could share a story or scenarios when you've been a friend to somebody and when you've been a mentor to somebody.
Okay, well, I was a birth coach for 20 years, and I help people have babies. My business card unofficially read, you get them in, I get them out. So one of my jobs was to mentor people when they're most vulnerable, which is actually the most dangerous and intense responsibility, because when somebody is vulnerable, you really can do whatever you want with them, and it can be very dangerous. So I had to be very focused on what was the woman's needs, what was her wishes before she went into labor, and how can I uphold them for her when she's vulnerable and she's in labor and she cannot uphold them herself. So that would basically be it's a very strong sense of responsibility for sure, and a heavy weight. And what I would do is when the woman would be, and before she was in labor, she would tell me what she wanted. She'd say, I want, I don't want an epidural. I do want an epidural. I want to be respected this way. I want to be covered. I don't want to be covered. Da, 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 da. And then when she was in labor and she kind of lost that sense of self and she was more in her body and giving birth, I was her memory of what she needed and what she was going for. And I think that that's a really good definition of mentorship, because when somebody comes to you, they're usually in a form, they're vulnerable or they're lost. There's something in them that's not going in the direction that they're trying to go in, and they're struggling with it, and they're trying to find their grounding and footing, and they don't have it. And your job is to put them on their feet. I know about you as a person that you are an ethical, moral person, and this behavior that you're doing is outside of your values. Right? That gives them a refocusing or something like that. That would be a mentor. As for a friend, again, I think that for me, friends, every single one of my friends doesn't match the other one.
What is it, like Sesame Street?
Yeah, it's like
one of these friends does not belong here, like that.
Yeah, sure, why not, Rabbi? So,
one of these podcasts doesn't belong here. Copyright.
Copyright everything under the sun except for this one.
Does everything under the sun count the sun, or do you guys exclude the sun?
No, it's under the sun.
It's under the sun.
Under the sun. Okay, fine. Yeah. We can handle that.
We can.
That is from the Torah, by the way.
Cover.
That statement.
We can cover the sun as long as we cover everything under it as well.
Okay,
including the flares that pop out of it.
Okay, so sun flares are covered. So being a friend, so what I think, each of my friends doesn't match the other one, and one of each friend helps accentuate an aspect of me that I want to experience and explore with that person. So for example, I have a friend, we just have tons of fun and try not to get arrested, right? So that's one friend. I have another friend where we just talk about our emotions all the time, and that's what we do.
Which friend is that? Tell me afterwards.
This is the part where I don't tell him everything that is said in a podcast stays in a podcast. Nothing goes outside the
No, it's
podcast.
going to be on YouTube.
Yeah,
so
nice
don't
try.
do it.
Nice try.
Everything goes everywhere.
It actually doesn't stay in the podcast.
No, I mean, like, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So each friend has a different aspect that I experience with them. I have my Frummy friends where we do our Frum stuff together, right? Each one does that thing for it. And each friend helps me identify and experience the world and I guess would quantify where I am in the world and how I'm experiencing the world. I can kind of bounce it off that friend. You know, I experienced this today, and then she will give me another scenario where she experienced that together. And I've learned that men and friends are very different, right? I actually tried to make my husband friends.
Yeah. What she does, just to clarify, she did this on the long weekend. It's the most ridiculous thing. Because
It's
men,
the first I'm hearing about this. So,
Yeah.
So I'm really
so
interested.
so she has a friend named Sarah, and Sarah has a husband named Lester, and they're in our school. Nice people. I don't know really Lester from a can of beans, outside the fact that I've met him like half a dozen times at school pickup, and he's like a nice guy and he has a beard. That's about it. And
Red beard.
Red Beard. He's part of the Red Beard Club. Hashtag Red Beard Club. So, so yeah, we'll make a hashtag. Anyway, so her and Sarah are like buddies, or like friends, and they experience things together and do all these stuff together and whatever. Cool. And basically, they conspired for me and Lester to be friends. So it's like, as far as she's concerned, it's like setting up these 5-year-olds in a sandbox. Okay, now play nice together. And so that's how it was, you know. So we went to Somes Island, and I just sit down next to Rachel and start schmoozing, and you know Lester's off on the side, and she's like, no, go play with your friend. And so I start talking with him. He's a nice guy. We just talked about this. Apparently he works at a workplace here in Wellington, and one of the community members works there. So it's a medical company, so it's interesting. And then in the middle, Rachel comes to me and she's like, so, what's his favorite color? I'm like, this is unbelievably ridiculous. Like, just let me converse with the guy. Like, what are you doing? Like, do you like the same things? Like, no, this doesn't, like, we're not 5.
So like a 9-year-old grandmother.
That's how it was. It's really strange. It's really bizarre. Anyways, we were fine. We were talking about...
So what's your definition of a friend then?
I've already defined what my definition is of a friend.
Well, you gave the camera to me.
Ah,
I'm
yes.
throwing it at you.
Oh, when have I been a friend? When have I been a mentor?
Microphone.
Microphone. The tripod.
Yeah, so now it's your
Of
turn.
objectivity.
Yeah, Mr. Tripod.
Yes. The microphone's on a tripod as well. So a friend, look, when I've been a friend to somebody, it's when Baruchel. It was great having you as a guest. We will have you on in future weeks, whether you like it or not. And I'm hopefully that you liked it. I hope she liked it. I think she had a good time. What do you think, Thomas? Think she had a good time?
It's been very fun.
Yeah. So I've been a friend to people when I've really just been there for them, and when I can just give them my honest opinion, but I make it very clear that I'm not telling them what to do. Right, and that's like, I think it's a big difference in a mentor and a friend. Like a mentor, people go to you because they want you to tell them what to do, or they want your perspective in order to influence their decisions. As a friend, sometimes you just want to hear yourself talk, not in a bad way, but in a good way, because you talk to somebody and you hear how it sounds back, and then you get perspective, and then your friend can just share their opinion. You either take it or not, but it's not consequential of the friendship whether they accept my opinion or not as a friend.
Would you say it's almost a different type of mentorship in that sense?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, that's a second opinion that I mentioned about Asel Harav. Have a charuta, someone who will challenge you, who won't just be a yes man or a woman, right? And that's really important.
Yeah.
Like in marriage, you have that to some degree, or to a very high degree, where you have...
This is your area of expertise.
This is my area of expertise. 15 years. Some people will say I'm an expert. Some people will say I just started scratching the surface. But, I mean, you have disagreements all the time. And you have the husband sometimes, the wife, on many occasions, telling the spouse, like, what to do, or their opinion or what they don't like or challenging them, right? It's really about challenging the other person to make them better.
Yeah.
And that's the purpose of a charuta. That's the purpose of disagreement. That's why when you learn, ideally a person should learn, whether it be Talmud or anything else, with a study partner.
Else. Yeah.
Because they'll either ask them very tough questions or give them a contradictory opinion or a different opinion or a different angle on it. And you're like, and then you have to listen to that. And the question is, do you accept that or not? But they could definitely teach you things. You can learn things from your friend. I'm not saying you can't learn things from your friend.
Yeah.
I just don't think that's as you mentioned, it's not the formal relationship. That's not the goal of friendship.
Okay.
It is definitely a byproduct of friendship. That's how I view it.
Okay. I don't think I fully agree, but I think we'll leave it at that for that point in particular.
Yeah, so for those listening to this podcast, I mean, you can choose what you agree with or not. I almost hope I'm representing you well. Basically, almost is saying that actually the goal of a friend is in fact a mentorship, even though they're not your mentor all the time. But the goal is to balance you out, is to have that dynamic, and you have a different dynamic with them because it's less formal, it's more subjective, and you have a very strong bond with them.
Almost in the sense where we were talking about seeking out a mentor, a selecharav, right? A friend is a mentor that you had not seeked out, is my sort of spin on that.
Oh, I see. That's interesting. Your friend just kind of naturally becomes your mentor.
Yeah. In the sense of bouncing ideas off. It's a type of mentorship. That's how I view it.
Well, that's a very interesting take. Yeah, I don't know what I think about that yet, but I'll let it be your take and your opinion for the sake of the disagreement.
Yeah.
And I'll just disagree with it just so that we disagree on something. Even though I think it's a very interesting point. In my perspective, is that the mentor needs to be somebody much more formal. Usually somebody older, though that's not necessarily a prerequisite. And it's somebody you look up to. By example, it could be in the area of halacha, it could be the area of emunah, of belief, or it could be the area of just life mentorship, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I know I have different people that I go to for different things.
I mean, it could be anything under the sun.
Anything.
Everything.
Or everything under the sun. Which, now point number 2. So you want to talk about being in pursuit of wisdom.
Yes.
So I want you to expand on that a little bit.
So in terms of, we touched on it briefly in the sense of a selecharav being, you need to go out and actively seek out the mentor. You have to seek out someone to be a mentor to you, in that sense. So would you say that is a pursuit of wisdom? And can you define the difference between, or distinguish between pursuit of wisdom versus pursuit of knowledge?
Pursuit of wisdom versus pursuit of knowledge. Well, wisdom and knowledge they're connected to information and understanding.
Yeah.
But they're very different levels of understanding. So one is knowledge is simply acquiring a lot of information. And wisdom, or there's a step beforehand called bina, which is kind of inference, which is, you hear information. What's really behind that? Or what does it infer? What does it mean? What's the unwritten?
Sort of looking into
the
underlying meaning.
So you can analyze it. And then
analyze
wisdom is how to apply it. So it's chokhmah, bina, v'da'at, and it could be its own podcast, but that's like the 3 levels of wisdom. Chokhmah, bina, v'da'at.
Yeah.
So that is information and analysis, if you will, or inference and application, or bringing knowledge into your life. Then you can have people that are intellectually brilliant but have no emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Right? You can have people that are intellectually brilliant but don't apply the values in their life. It could be emotional intelligence, but they just either don't care or they just don't apply it. They'll be like, well, this is a purely theoretical issue.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's not wisdom. Wisdom is taking, and I think the ability of a mentor is actually to apply and I'm glad you brought up the point. You apply the knowledge into practice as it pertains to you.
And is that the nuance of where wisdom comes in?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, even we talked about this last night in the shir a little bit about hevu metunim badin, right? Be deliberate in judgment, and how you have to be very deliberate about as a rabbi, or even as a mentor, or even as a friend. If you're giving advice, what advice you give to what person? You won't give the same advice to different people, even in the same scenario. Let's say two people. Well, let's take the job because we're just on that road. So let's say two people.
Welcome back to Zach.
Welcome back, Zach. Zach still wants to leave his job. Poor Zach. He hasn't decided that he was going to leave his job or not, because we've thrown him around to friend, mentor, and this mentor, and that mentor. We've drove him nuts. He's been in a suit. He's been at a pub in his jeans. He's been like all over the place.
Decides
He's been on the
2
phone.
a.m. in the morning that
What's
he needs
up,
to, needs to call a
At 2
friend.
a.m. And then you say, Zach, go to bed. I'll talk to you in the morning. What the hell are you doing? Go to bed, Zach. That's the end of this podcast. 2 in the morning. It's like when Eliza wakes me up. So yeah, poor Zach. He's now, there's another guy named Sean. Zach and Sean are in the same job.
Yeah.
Zach wants to leave, and the truth is Zach should leave. Why? He's miserable. His skill set is actually much more entrepreneurial. He's really not. He's not in a box kind of person, and for a whole host of. And he's also in a financial situation to take 3 months off, explore his options, and go on either to pursue a degree or to pursue another job. Whereas Sean, you'd be like, listen, if he leaves this job, he doesn't have a lot of good options.
Yeah.
And he really should stay. So two people, same scenario. Of course, it's all theoretical, but this happens all the time. Same situation, same question, different answers.
Yeah, correct.
Because you're applying. You have to, but both as a friend and as a mentor. And this is the part where I do agree with you. Despite my disagreement.
See.
Yeah, 1 point for you. That a friend and a mentor, this is where a friend could really be a good mentor, because they really understand the person. And a good mentor also has to understand the person. I still disagree that they have to be the same understanding, because a mentor understands the person much more objectively, not as their friend. Like, it's a different level of understanding. You have much more of a global picture, a macro picture, where there's a friend who's very, like, I love this person, so I'm going to be with them, and I really care about them. The mentor cares, but in a very different way, much more in a parental way, or an authoritarian way, as an authority, not as a buddy.
That's the nuance of the
it's a very important
conversation. How the conversation would
no,
be.
but not just that. It's a different level of
friend,
understanding. Like one of the rabbis I go to for mentorship, Rabbi Ari Pamensky. He likes me. He genuinely likes me. But if he wanted to go away for a weekend with a buddy and play golf, like, he wouldn't go with me, because I'm more of a student than his friend.
Yeah.
But he'll care about me. He knows my history. He even taught me in high school. So I go way back with him. And he's been my mentor now for 21 years. One of my mentors I go to. And he's in Canada. It doesn't matter where I am in the world. In Vancouver, in Toronto, and Israel, and now here. He's kind of escorted me along the way. Rabbi Yeshua Grunstein, another one of my mentors, he literally placed me in this job and other jobs around the world. I have a lot of trust in him, and I ask him a lot of halachic questions, but also policy questions, and also my role as a rabbi and different challenges I have. And he gives me a perspective on things. He gives me what they do in other communities, but he's not my buddy.
Yeah,
he'll never be my friend. He'll stay at my house. And I'll stay at his house, and we'll treat him nicely, and I'll schmooze with him, and I like talking with him. But I view him much more as a mentor, as a rav, if you will, than a friend. And I think that dynamic has to kind of stay.
Okay.
In my opinion, that's how I keep the relationship at bay.
Yeah.
And in the proper context. Whether, like, a really good friend of mine, Yaniv Cohen, he's not my mentor, he's my friend.
Yeah.
So, like, when I needed one time when I needed a loan or consolidation, things like that, I went to him. I wouldn't go to my mentor for that.
Yeah.
Right? But he helped me out.
Mm.
But it's a different type of helping out.
Yeah.
And we schmooze about each other's kids and this and it's very different.
Yeah. In that sense, I agree with you.
Mm.
But,
1 point for me.
But I still disagree in the sense that I think there's a crossover between friendship and mentorship. But you've started mentioning your mentors. So to end, how about sharing with everyone, and I'll do it as well, one lesson that you've learned from a mentor of yours? You can name the mentor if you want.
Yeah.
You can not name the mentor if you want.
One good piece of advice that I've received from a mentor. One thing that just comes to mind is don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. I remember recently I had this discussion. I was with Rabbi Grunstein in the context of something, and just in my capacity here as a rabbi, sometimes you want to, there's an issue, right, with either somebody or with whether it be something in the community or a halachic issue or a policy issue, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what the issue is. But there's an issue because they come up. It's part of life. It's part of the dynamic of the job. So it's normal. And it should come up. Like, if issues don't come up when you're a rabbi, then you're not being a good rabbi. Because it's part of the job. It's part of the dynamic of a community.
Yeah.
But the question was presented at a particular issue, and basically, should I blow it up, or can I isolate the issue from the rest of the context what's going on? And it's very easy to want to blow it up or say, this is ridiculous, or to go do away with the whole thing, right, altogether, or walk away from the scenario altogether, versus tackling the very, very specific issue within that scenario and confronting the rest of the scenario as it is, kind of isolating what I identified as the issue. And that's what he told me. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. You want to try to isolate the issue and not blow it up, not blow up the relationship, not blow up the whole scenario. And sometimes you need to hear that from somebody else who understands the context of it and understand how this would work in other communities, which he has. I don't have that many mentors that have that perspective.
Yeah.
Because he's literally in touch with hundreds of communities around the world.
Yeah. So that's your one
that's
piece
my
of
one
advice.
piece of good advice.
Yeah.
What's
Don't
yours?
throw out a baby with bathwater.
That's right.
For
Don't
me,
throw out babies in general. It's really bad for you.
I have my kancho, so the leader of the club, my karate club in Israel, is a guy named Ronnie Kluger. Hungarian guy.
Oh. Yeah.
But you walk into the dojo area, and he treats you like family. Well, he treats us like family anyway. And when we first start training, he asks a simple question to all students, and the question is, what is martial arts? Why is it known as martial arts? So, the answer is, if you transferred the same thing into literature, say, most people learn the ABCs. Yeah? In today's world, a lot of people know how to read and write.
Thank God.
But everyone has the same tools. It's the difference of how you use them. So you can either be, with knowing the ABCs, you can either be Shakespeare, or you could just write a nice letter to a friend. Same thing is true in the martial arts. You we all have limbs. Most of us have limbs, arms and legs. The difference is we know how to use them, or do we know not how to not use them? And that's why a martial art is a martial art. And in that sense, the advice is very sort of grey in the sense of, you mentioned that mentors give advice that's not necessarily clear. But you're practicing an art in the sense of, know that you can do whatever you can with this art, but it's up to you of what you choose to do with it.
I did not know that about martial arts. That makes a lot of sense. Wow,
It's
that's
more
good
than
piece
just
of advice.
more than just beating people up.
Oh, I
Tell
know
you
that. I definitely know that. I know that it's mainly for self-defense, not for like brutally attacking people.
Yeah,
But
never start a fight, always finish it.
always, very good. Always finish it. Very good. Yeah. Karate is meant to be there, but yeah, martial arts. Because why is it an art? I always do like capoeira as an art.
Yeah, well, that's more like dancing.
Right. Well, that's how I view arts.
Yeah.
But you're right. As far as attacking, no two people will use the tools, even the martial arts tools, the same way.
Exactly.
Dynamic because your body type, because of different the scenarios and whatnot. Very, very good. Well, it is. Look, one of the message I have to our listeners is that it's really important to establish yourself a mentor. I'll get back to our original subject, which is mentorship. Obviously, because of the Mishnah and just in general, there's a crossover between mentorship and friendship. It's really up to you how you define it. We've provided several definitions here with our tripod of objectivity here, and we thank our guests for kind of like. By the way, I want to say about my wife. She basically just like walked in here and proclaimed herself a guest, which was great because I was going to invite her in like 2 or 3 weeks, but she's always invited. So Rachel, if you're listening to this, at this point,
we are open to guests as well.
We're always open for you coming in. Open door policy. You're literally family.
Yeah.
Not just because you're married to me, but because
preferably not in the middle of recording.
That's right. Preferably not in the middle of recording. We'll invite you, but you can come in whenever you want. Give your objectivity and leave. That's the privilege you have as a Rebbitzin. All right. So, but we really talked about mentorship, and so really, what I encourage people is to find yourself a mentor. If you haven't found yourself a mentor, go and find yourself a mentor. They could be male, they could be female, they could be a rabbi, they could be a spiritual leader, they could be a career counselor, they could be not a professional at all. They could just be somebody you look up to. It could be in the context of therapy, it could be in the context of one of your teachers, it could just be in the context of somebody who you think is wiser than you, or possibly older and wiser than you. And you view them much more of a mentor than as a friend, or both. And it all depends how you define it. So I'll leave that up to everybody here. Yep. But it is extremely important because people cannot go through life alone. And what we learned from COVID is that one of the things we learned from COVID is that isolation is very, very difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And we do not live in isolation. That's why mentorship, and regardless of if you think it's a friend or not a friend, however you define it, but having somebody else to help guide you, especially in your life's choices, whether they be small choices or large choices, or life-changing choices, definitely. Nobody should go through that alone, and that's the purpose of mentorship.
So I think we'll end with that. And please like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know what you know. What you know. Let us know what you think. Are you a mentor? Have you ever been in a position to mentor? So on and so forth. I'm not sure what we're talking about next week, but we'll decide that at a later date. And yeah, please subscribe. Please share the podcast with people. We want to grow. We want to...
Yeah, share it on your LinkedIn. Share it on all your social media platforms.
Yeah.
Just put a link of the YouTube to WhatsApp groups that you think are relevant. You know, like, don't troll your friends, don't bombard them, you know, but send them to people you think would benefit from listening to this.
Yeah.
They could be from all walks of life. They can be in any country. They can be Jewish. They could be not Jewish.
Yeah.
They could be any person, any living, breathing human being that has the ability to listen to podcasts should listen to everything under the sun.
Yes.
And so we get at least 100 subscribers. You know, there's 7 billion people in the world. We can surely get up to 1,000 subscribers.
100.
Initially,
Let's go for
100.
Yeah.
We're at 22 right now. Let's get it to 100, and we need you to help us out with that, you the listeners.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for listening, and have a wonderful day, and I hope you learned something from this, and also that we entertained you somewhat with our tripod of objectivity dynamic that we had today.
Also, be on the lookout for our Instagram page that will be going live
Exciting.
very, very, very soon. So be on the lookout and share it on there. Share it with everyone that you can. Right. Have a good week. Have a good day. Have a good month. So on and so forth. And
we'll see you guys next week.
You'll hear from us next week. You won't see us at all.
We'll see a beautiful picture of Wellington.
Yeah. Maybe in Instagram.
Oh, maybe on Instagram.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Amos.
Thanks. Bye.